Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kylie, if you didn't know. Today I wanted to film a video where I talked about my favorite reads of 2023. I will be listing off all of the books that I read, but I think I want to talk about maybe my top 5. Just because I feel like I talk a lot and I don't want to talk extensively about 10 books, perhaps. Let me pull up my Goodreads really quickly, and I kind of need to film this video quickly so I will not be pulling the books from my shelves. I had an okay reading year. I've been kind of struggling to read in the past 2 years, but I do feel like I'm entering a good rhythm with feeling inspired and motivated to read books, and also finding kind of the niche of books that really excite me, if you will. But I read 35 books last year, and a lot of them were kind of on the back end of the year, so I do hope to read more books this year. I set my goal to 50. I've never read 50. I feel like the thing about me is that I get really devoted to a single hobby at any given time, so I'll either be really into movies or really into books or really into music, and then that's all I focus on. But I think a goal that I have for next year is to just try to be intentional about the balance of all of my interests. So yeah, I guess to start, I will list off all of the books that I've read, and then I will go into my top 5 after. The very first book that I read was Bonjour Tristesse by Francois Sagan, Olivia by Dorothy Strachey, Why Marx Was Right by Terry Eagleton, 6 Memos for the Next Millennium by Italo Calvino, When Angels Speak of Love by Bell Hooks, Dearly by Margaret Atwood, Bright Dead Things by Ada Limon, Big Swiss by Jen Begin, Critical Lives, Virginia Woolf, Socialism, Utopian and Scientific by Frederick Engels, Feminism is for Everybody by Bell Hooks, Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart, Inseparable by Simone de Beauvoir, Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, Eileen by Tessa Moshfegh, Shifting the Silence by Etel Adnan, A People's Guide to Capitalism by Hadas Thier, An Apprenticeship or the Book of Pleasures, Daydream and Drunkenness of a Young Lady, Reform or Revolution by Rosa Luxemburg, The Communist Manifesto, Look at the Lights, My Love by Annie Ernaux, Happening by Annie Ernaux, Minor Detail by Adonia Shibli, The Secret History by Donna Tartt, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus, Notes from Underground, Fyodor Dostoevsky, Time by Etel Adnan, My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell, The Night is Darkening Round Me, Emily Bronte, Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and Agua Viva by Clarice Lispector. So, those were all of the books that I read. I wish I read bigger books. I read a lot of smaller books. I want to be more intentional about the length of books that I read. I do enjoy longer books because I do feel like I am more immersed and familiar with the characters by the end of the novel. But yeah, I read a lot of short books. But I think I would prefer in this coming year not to read exclusively short books or exclusively long books. I think the general goal that I have for the year to come is just to balance myself. And I've come to learn that balance isn't something that just happens, it's something that is very intentional. So that is a learning lesson for me. But here we go into my top 5, if you will. I would say there weren't any books that I didn't like. I did DNF Big Swiss. I thought that novel was overrated, but outside of that, I enjoyed every single book that I read. Big Swiss was kind of my only disappointment of the year, so yeah, I would say that's kind of a win. I guess I will just get into my top 5. I've talked about a lot of these books already, but I suppose I will obviously kind of try to go into more detail. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like when I talk about books, which is literally the entire premise of this channel or these videos, I feel really insecure about the way that I come across and the way that I talk. And sometimes I feel like I don't make sense, but maybe that's just kind of the nature of like thought, of it's very disconnected, and it's like speaking for me as a way of piecing together my thoughts. And I mean, I guess that's kind of everybody, but I guess I am not confident in my in the skill of piecing my thoughts together in a way that is articulate and understandable and digestible for people. So yeah, I don't know. This whole channel is kind of me learning how to do this in a way that is good. So I don't know what prompted that kind of precursor, but I thought it was worth saying. I guess to start, number 5, my 5th favorite book of the year was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I loved just the general like ambiance of the book. I really think Oscar Wilde is a very clever author. The only other work I've read by him is his play The Importance of Being Earnest, and I feel like his specialty is like being clever and witty and things of that sort. And I think there's a lot of nuance in his writing and his portrayal of characters. I think he is great at fleshing out characters and doing so in a way that makes the reader understand what he's trying to say on a greater scale, as far as what his thoughts on different life themes are. I think The Picture of Dorian Gray is really interesting in discussing vanity and morality and what it is to be a good person, and what vanity is and how it manifests and how it affects individuals and the people around them. And those are themes that I don't necessarily find myself reading about in other novels, but I do believe that this book is very much explicitly about the self in the midst of others. I think this book kind of motivated a form of reflection in myself and my own perception of myself and how that manifests in group settings and my friendships and relationships, etc. I think there's something so much bigger than the actual relationships that Dorian has to kind of the society around him in the novel, and I think that is kind of the point. Yeah, I think Dorian is a very interesting character, and it's a very typical kind of fall from grace sort of narrative, but I think it's very well done, and I think it was very thought-provoking. I think that this novel portrays a good interiority of the self through the perspective of Dorian Gray, and also kind of, like I said earlier, the fall from grace when one becomes too self-involved. It just kind of makes me think about like why it is important to be a good person and what that looks like. And yeah, they're all very big, abstract, almost very pervasive themes, but I think there is like value in those sorts of stories. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. All right, my next favorite book is a poetry collection by Ada Limon called Bright Dead Things. I think she is an amazing poet. I think her voice is representative of the version of womanhood that seems so present today. I think the way she articulates her experience is something that I directly relate to in a very tangible way. She speaks in a way that is representative of kind of the collective of what it is to be a woman and to be a minority and to navigate all of that now, and what the effects of that are in our family lives, in our relationships, in our friendships, and in our opinions of ourselves. I've read a couple of her collections as well, some last year, and I really think she is somebody who's very accessible. And I say accessible in a very positive way, because I think when there is accessibility to a sort of language, and especially when it comes to poetry, in a sense there is something more effective about it in reaching people and touching people and showing people what you are saying and what your perspective is. And I do have moments where I do feel like I'm reading something sort of profound. In a lot of ways, the way that I feel with Clarice Lispector, where Clarice Lispector is more abstract, I think Ada Limon is maybe more grounded, but I think the feeling that I get when I read both of them is very similar. And it is the feeling of seeing something articulated on a page that holds the sort of feelings that just kind of permeate the body. But yeah, I think she's an amazing poet. Love her. That was my number 4. The next book that I have is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. This is a collection of essays and lectures that she gave. Audre Lorde is a Black, lesbian, feminist poet and writer. I'm currently reading her poetry collection called The Black Unicorn, and I plan on reading more of her work in the coming year, but this was my first work of hers that I have read, and I think she's just incredible. I have so much admiration for her and her work and her perspective. I think her voice is one filled very much with the kind of feeling of certainty and confidence, and the words that she says very much resonate with me, not in the way that I know that I can relate to her in every way, because that's just simply not the case, just by nature of us being two completely different people coming from two completely different backgrounds. But I think that she speaks to her audience in a way that is so compelling. The essay Poetry is Not a Luxury is in this collection, as well as The Master's Tools Will Not Dismantle the Master's House is in here. And I forget the exact name, but it's something about the erotic. That is one of my favorite essays in this book as well. And I think her approach to writing is very much in a way of analyzing and critiquing things on a societal level, while also still being grounded in feeling. And I think that's what really strikes a chord with me. I think she is able to maintain a really good balance between those two. In a way, I don't know if pragmatic would be the correct word, but I think the reality of life oftentimes is that we cannot operate from pure feeling or purely from our interpretation of society. We have to find a midpoint between those two. And I think that kind of is represented in her writing and her perspective and her experience. If you haven't read anything from her, I highly, highly, highly recommend this work. I think everybody who's read Audre Lorde has had great things to say. And I'm no different, because I am an Audre Lorde stan. I truly love her, and I cannot wait to explore more of her works in the coming year and in the future, just in general. So my second favorite book of the year was Agua Viva by Clarice Lispector. I love Clarice Lispector. I feel like I have talked about her in nearly every video that I have filmed on this channel. I just really love Clarice Lispector because I think she's just a woman that articulates the confusion of being a person and being a woman, and being a woman with feelings and desires on the page. I don't know, I really see myself in her work. Not that we're the same, but I do read her work and I feel seen. So I think that's just the feeling of that is very gratifying. And she is somebody who writes in a very abstract way, and in a way that is hard to grasp. And Agua Viva is kind of like a fragmented sort of, I don't know, I feel like the structure is unable to be really articulated in a concise way, but my attempt will be that it is just a bunch of prose of her thoughts. I think by nature she is an author that meanders a lot, and I think that is a product of her just following her thoughts and her feelings and her writing, and that is something that I find myself doing oftentimes. I hope to read a few more of her works this year as well. I also read The Drunk Daydream of a Drunken, I literally just said it earlier, but the Blue Penguin Classics one, and then also The Apprenticeship and the Book of Pleasures, and really enjoyed both, but I think of the three, Agua Viva was the one that resonated the most with me. Finally, we have reached my favorite book of the year, which if you watch my previous video, you would come to know that this has now become my favorite book of all time, and that is Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I think the reality of the situation is that it is very possible, as I explore and kind of go through Virginia Woolf's written work, that this #1 spot could be taken by ones that I have yet to read. However, that being said, of the works from Virginia Woolf that I have read thus far, Orlando is probably one that has struck me the most. All of her works have been works that have moved me deeply, but in Orlando, I think that what she explores in terms of gender identity and sex and the physical body and queerness and subversiveness, especially in the time that she wrote this. This was published in, I think, like 1928. I could be wrong, but somewhere around then. And her using the character Orlando, a character that changes gender throughout the novel, as a means to express queerness in the time where being openly queer, lesbian, or gay, or what have you, was not taken well, at least in a public way. I know some take issue with the pacing and generally her writing style, and I would say her writing style is a bit more of an antiquated version of Clarice Lispector's writing style, or perhaps Clarice Lispector's writing style is a more modern version of Virginia Woolf. I think they are both very similar in their perspectives, at least from kind of perspective I'm coming from. Orlando is also inherently a feminist novel, and I think that in itself is something that is very valuable to me. I really love Virginia Woolf. She's my favorite author of all time. Like, she is someone who could never miss for me, in a way that is extremely biased. So I think one of these days I will film a video that talks more about Virginia Woolf, maybe, because as I read more of her works, maybe I will do that at some point this year, because I love her, and she's an author that I discovered a few years ago and has stuck with me in a way that we will never be untethered. That is my parasocial relationship to this woman. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please let me know what your thoughts were. I really do love hearing other people's thoughts and perspectives, and especially background knowledge and kind of lore behind certain books. I think I've learned a lot from people that have commented in the past about what they know about certain authors or the history of things. So I love learning about that. So if you know anything, please share. I know some of you people like just know a ton of shit about specific things, and I hope those specific things that you know cross over with things that maybe I don't. I believe I have spoken enough at this point, but I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.